So again, thank you so much. Welcome and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining today's Region 10 Education Service Center Family Webinar. Today's session is offered in partnership with Partners Resource Network, and we're always grateful to have Jim from PRN joining us today. We thank you again for being here and for your continued partnership in supporting families across Texas. Now, before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that a Spanish language version of this presentation will begin at 1 p.m. So if you or someone you know would prefer to participate in Spanish, we invite you to join us at that time for the same information and resources. And please note that today's session is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the Region 10 Family Engagement webpage within 7 to 10 business days. Now, today's presentation will focus on planning for life after high school and the transition resources available to support students and families as they prepare for what's coming next. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Amy, who will guide us through our session today. So Amy, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. So good afternoon. My name is Amy Reeves, and I am the transition consultant for Region 10 Education Service Center. I support school districts and charters in helping students with disabilities meet their goals for life after high school. Today, I will be discussing the required components of transition services. School districts and charters have the autonomy to implement processes and procedures on what this looks like. So when you're looking at your student's transition plan, be looking for these key elements, but know that they may look slightly different. We're going to be covering 8 core areas of transition planning today. And my primary source document for today is the Texas Transition and Employment Guide. I will be directing you to resources found in this document throughout our training today. When looking at federal law, transition planning begins at age 16. However, in Texas, our state law requires that all components of transition planning begin by age 14. So looking at parent and student involvement, the first component of transition planning is parent and student involvement. Be open, be honest, and work together to create a transition plan that aligns with what's really going to happen after high school. When the student asks for information, take time to complete it and get it back to them. If they ask for a person-centered plan, it is all about you and the student. Make the time to sit down and talk with them and talk about your family's dreams and hopes. It is okay to dream and dream aloud so that the school can come alongside you and help teach some of those skills. On the screen are 2 screenshots from the Texas Transition and Employment Guide. These are found in every chapter of the guide, and it helps you and your student to be more involved in the ARD process. IDEA is our federal law governing special education services. It requires that age-appropriate transition assessment be completed. Generally speaking, consent is not required. The letter from OLEX linked on the slide guides this conversation in our schools. When schools select transition assessment, they must look at age-appropriate assessments. It would not be appropriate to pull an assessment designed for an elementary school student. Assessments can be formal or informal and should have a summary of the results of the assessment in the IEP. Typically, that is found in the required transition service pages or the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, or PLAF. On the slide, you will find potential domains that the school district or charter will access. Many times, this is driven from the parent interview, student interview, teacher input, and person-centered plans. Post-secondary goals are written to occur after high school. 18 plus is still high school. The school district or charter will develop these post-secondary goals to drive all of the components of transition planning. In the IEP, you should see a goal for education and/or training and a goal for employment. This is required for all students, regardless of the severity of their disability. It will look different for every student. If appropriate, the ARD committee will develop a post-secondary goal for independent living. These goals are updated annually, but may just be reviewed as the student's post-secondary goals have not changed. The first set of post-secondary goals we're going to look at is education and training. I tried to give you three very different examples of what it could look like in the IEP. The first one is for a student who does not plan to go to college, but would rather enter the workforce. On-the-job training would be appropriate to plan for in this scenario. The second example is for a student who is planning to go to college. It is important for the student to connect with the disability office so that he or she has access to accommodations. By writing it in the post-secondary goal, that lets the ARD committee know that during that student's senior year, that student will need to connect with the disability office prior to graduation. The third example is for a student who may need significant supports into adulthood. This student's post-secondary goal allows him or her to continue learning through the therapy that is provided. Now we're going to look at employment. Example 1 is for a student who has chosen to go right into the workforce. This student didn't show a need for additional supports and should be successful in the work setting. Example 2 is for a student who wants to continue his or her education, but is not going to enter the workforce until after obtaining the required credentials to work in his or her chosen field. The third example is a student who may not be able to work a full 40 hours a week and that might need ongoing support. This post-secondary goal would indicate to the ARD committee that this student would need to connect to Texas Workforce or the local Intellectual Developmental Disability Office for supports. The last example is for a student who may have significant support needs and employment looks different for him or her. The last post-secondary goal area is independent living. Example 1 is for a student who maybe has some behavioral challenges and will need to use coping skills at work, in the community, and at home to live the best life possible. This goal would indicate to the ARD committee that a coordinated set of activities or annual goals is needed to address this need. The second example is potentially for a student who is planning to live out in the community upon graduation. This goal reminds the ARD committee that the student needs a coordinated set of activities to address financial planning. That can be addressed through coursework at the school or support from the parent with check-ins from the school staff for support. The last example is for a student who is maybe participating in Special Olympics or varsity soccer. How will that adult continue to be connected to recreation and leisure that they are currently accessing while in high school? This goal would drive potential coordinated set of activities for the student to explore. There must be at least one annual goal that addresses transition. It can be academic, functional, or behavioral, and is going to be found in the annual goals section of the IEP. That is the same place where you see goals for reading and math. If a student is planning to go to college, then writing a 5-page paper could be transition related. But if a student is going into welding, math might be a better choice. However, you might see a behavioral goal marked as transition because that is needed in order for the student to meet his or her post-secondary goals. When you look at federal law, it says transition services. Coordinated set of activities is often used to describe transition services. Coordinated set of activities are typically found in the required transition service pages. These must address instruction, related services, community experiences, employment, and other post-school adult living objectives, and if appropriate, daily living skills and functional vocational evaluation. Some of these will not be needed based upon individual need, but if the ARD committee determines it is not needed, I recommend that a statement be included in the IEP and a reasoning as to why it is not. Oftentimes, it is because the student does not show a need based upon that transition assessment. Here are some examples of a coordinated set of activities for each area. These are just examples, and you can have more than one in any given area. I like to think of coordinated set of activities as the task list for students to complete. Oftentimes, we are not teaching a skill, but need the student to complete something so that they can be better prepared for what they have planned for life after high school. When you look at the instruction example above, that tells me that the student's post-secondary goals should reflect that he is going to college. Everything related to transition should align with the transition assessment and post-secondary goals. Course of study is a little more complicated, and we see schools doing it different ways. What we know is that the course of study for a high school student should reflect the courses the student will take in high school and align to his or her post-secondary goals. Additionally, it should include classes that will allow the student to meet credit requirements for graduation in 4 years. The course of study is sometimes in the required transition service pages, sometimes it's an attachment to the IEP, and sometimes the IEP has a section labeled course of study. If you have a hard time finding it, please follow up with your school district or charter to see where they place it in the IEP. Self-determination is a predictor for post-school success and maybe one of the most important things you can do for your child. In the My Rights section of the Texas Transition and Employment Guide, TEA touches on supported decision-making, which allows a student to choose a trusted adult to help them to make decisions. This is different from guardianship, as the adult student is still the decision maker, but it has identified a person as support. Disability Rights has a section of their website dedicated to supported decision-making as well. The other document is the Next Steps to Independence. This document is broken down into age categories of things that you can do at home to help your child learn skills for self-determination. If you have a child who is 17 but cognitively functioning at a 3-year-old level, it is okay to go to the birth to age 3 section. Just make sure that whatever you are doing, it is age appropriate. For example, instead of offering a choice between Wheels on the Bus and If You're Happy and You Know It to listen to, consider music that 17-year-olds are listening to, like a song from Wicked or Taylor Swift. The schools will refer a family to an agency if appropriate. If they are referring, they should be asking you for consent to invite them to the ARD meeting. Please be sure to let them know if you grant that consent or not. Texas Workforce Solutions Vocational Rehabilitation works with students ages 14 to 22, and then students move into adult services after that. They can help with preparing for college or finding a job with pre-employment transition services, pre-ETS. The link will take you to their website with specific examples of what they may be able to offer. The Local Intellectual and Developmental Disability Authority, or LIDA, helps support people with an intellectual disability. They also manage some of the Medicaid waiver programs. These waiver programs are typically 18 to 22 years before you will be able to access those services. It is important that you sign up for these as soon as possible. If you take anything away from today, and you have a child that will potentially qualify for these services, that should be your priority along with self-determination. If you're a foster parent or someone who supports foster youth, encourage the youth to work with the Transition Center and encourage staff from the center to be part of the IEP. They create a transition plan, and wouldn't it be great if all of us were working together to create plans that align? The Mental Health Authority is available for those who need mental health supports. A school might refer a student and his or her family to this authority if the student is receiving counseling as part of their special education services or if a need has been identified. I've listed other resources, but the school is obligated to consider whether or not a student needs support from one of the 4 above. It is also important to note that you do not have to wait for the school to refer your child. You can reach out to them and start that process at any time as long as age eligibility is met. If you are currently connected to an agency, either from one above or something else, notify the school so that they can obtain consent to invite and that provider can help provide input in potential strengths and needs for your child. By age 17, you will receive notification that all rights transfer to the student when he or she turns 18. At 18, you will receive notification that those rights have transferred. The notice of transfer of rights gives good resources for families to better understand this process. School districts will often host parent nights and invite attorneys or others to talk about guardianship, the supported decision-making, and power of attorney. It is important to attend any family engagement nights that your school district offers, as the information is valuable for planning and for informing parents. With that being said, Region 10, Partners Resource Network, the ARC, and the Parent and Family Engagement partner with local school districts to host Connecting the Dots. Connecting the Dots Expos are a series of informational fairs for families and children with disabilities, their caregivers, educators, as well as vendors who provide services. The purpose of the fair is to provide information about community-based resources, services, and supports that would assist children and their families. The fair will offer information and resources such as insurance, medical and mental health services, educational support, employment training and support, post-secondary planning, recreational activities, support groups, legal support, and more. The day is structured for attendees to have informal access to the variety of vendors participating, as well as attending structured content breakout sessions. I hope to see you at one of our expos. Thank you for being with me today. I hope that the information that was shared is helpful and that you feel more comfortable talking about transition with your child and the school. SpedTex and Partners Resource Network are great resources for you if you have any questions after today.
Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. We so appreciate you highlighting these important resources. And remember, families, that today's webinar was recorded and will be posted on the Region 10 website within about 7 to 10 business days. And we'll also email all of you a link to access today's presentation materials, as well as a link to where the recording will be posted. Now, before we close, I do want to remind everyone of a few more resources, as Amy mentioned earlier, to explore transition planning tools, family-friendly guides, and statewide supports. You can visit www.spedtex.org for additional information. We also want to invite you to join us at our next Region 10 Family Webinar on January 13th, where we will focus on understanding behavior intervention plans and how they support students across school settings. In addition, Partners Resource Network, as Amy mentioned, offers ongoing trainings, resources, and one-to-one support for families navigating special education and transition services. And you can visit them at prntexas.org